I love how that's her perception of... And he's not quite sure. That just kind of blinds him momentarily, though, for a couple of seconds. Oh my god. It is. Oh, that just clicks perfectly, doesn't it? Store hours. 12 to 6. Perfect. That makes so much sense. Okay, so it's not something that was special. It just appears to be the television. CRT, to be a bit more specific, right? Given that he specializes in CRTs. I mean, it was right there the whole time. Right under our noses, literally. 12 to 6, store hours. The 42-inch. It's in pieces, as he told Amani Suzuha. Yes. Light bulb moment? But? Sending memories, eh? Interesting, but isn't that kind of similar to reading Steiner? Oh man. There's a limitation. She's a bit hesitant about the whole thing. Fair enough. Yeah. Control, eh? Ugh. Good question, good question. Whoa, look at this. Interesting approach. Did something happen there? Oh, shooting daggers. Locked in on Okurin. Time leap, eh? Interesting, that's his instinct. Oh boy. As punishment? Oh. Yeah, that must have looked scary to her, right? That's Okabe Rintaro. Look at that, the contrasting read on Okurin, right? She's a little bit confused about it. Is he okay? There it is. She's been alluding to this, Suzuha. Is that not the message board? Again, the crucial component is not yet, right? That's always been the crucial component. Now, she didn't say spy specifically, Okarin. She is hesitant. Go on, go on. Ah, there it is. Fractured relationship. They've been setting that up for some time now. Oh, oh, beautiful. A rival. Oh, he was. Inspired by her father. She is a genius after all, a prodigy. Oh, to make him proud. Oh, look at this shot. Beautiful compositing. Oh, yes. Bruised ego, eh? Pride. It's a hell of a thing. That's your daughter, though. Ah. I mean, he picked up on something some time ago, but... Do you guys plan on telling people about it, though? That was so soothing. Hold on, hold on. This is classic Okarin. There it is. He just hides it quite effectively. Almost kind of felt like a K-drama moment. Oh no. Or whoever. It's a great episode, man. Oh god, PNG. Oh god, is that like a... Yeah, I mean, that's the desired effect. A doll head? Mayuri, eh? That's who he thinks of immediately. Whoa. Look at this. Wow. The only thing that matters. Getting to Mayuri. Oh no. Oh. Hey, it's that angle again. Yeah, he's under a different type of stress though. Okay.
どうしたのこんな夜に。
やっぱり外からパソコンアクセスして何か変と思ってたんだけど、
何かあったの？
今ここセルンの中心部
Oh
とダイレ
shit.
クトで回線がつながってる。セルンシステムを掌握したというのか。まあね、キリと言いたいところだけど、実際はなんかわからないうち
They wanted this to happen, man.
いつの間にか
Breadcrumb
セルン
trail.
が全裸待機してた的な。
こっちが何もしてないのに繋がっているって、つまりセルンの方がこっちの
The jaws are closing in.
来たってことじゃないの？
でもバレるようなヘマはしてないはずだし、今ならこっちから LHC
まさか、
だって
yeah,
使い放題だ。
no.
セルン
LHC が
Makise did say the current equipment is not enough.
おかわり？携帯に何かあったの？
Sure did. But the origin of that message is still kind of interesting. Oh, yeah. Oh. Interesting ending. Didn't expect it. To end off on that note. Okay, folks, let's get into it. Episode 11 of Steins Gate, nearly at the midpoint of the anime. Listen, I mean, that's yet another phenomenal episode. You know, I almost said fantastic, but I think, yeah, that's another phenomenal episode. And yeah, you know, it's just on this incredible trajectory, this exponential incline. And, you know, it kind of coincides with these escalating stakes and the build up from, you know, episode to episode and the moment to moment build up, you know, throughout these episodes. Now, you know, before I go any further, I'm not saying, you know, that it's getting good now or that, you know, this is the best it's been. No. That's, you know, that's not my point, or that's not the point I'm trying to make here. But, you know, it is on a really specific trajectory at this point, you know, over the span of the past, you know, 3-4 episodes. But point being, you know, it's been fantastic since day one. And you know my take on the things I've really kind of taken to about this story, about this anime, and the characters of this anime, and the different elements of this anime, right? I've been hooked. I've been locked in since episode 1, and I've loved every second of it, every moment of it, every episode of it. Honestly, I can sit here and say that all 11 episodes have been a fantastic experience, right? And yeah, you know, it's bittersweet, you know, that I am about to hit the midpoint. But you know, I'll be honest, I don't know how it feels for you guys. It kind of does feel like it flew by, for me at least. I just think it continues to strike that perfect balance, right? Engaging plot, you know, compelling plot, and all of those elements, right? The mystery box element of it all. And then you've got the character side of it, right? One of the strongest elements of this anime, of this story, right? The tenderness that's present throughout these interpersonal relationships, right? These moments that these really unique characters share. The bonds of a lifetime, essentially, right? You know, I go on and on about the bonds. Yeah, it's a really special thing of this anime, of this story, right? You know, I get a lot of those moments here, you know, be it Okarin and Mayuri, be it Okarin and Makise or Makise. And, you know, in these moments and through these moments, you get to see the heart of gold, right? Okabe Rintaro. I always love to point out, you know, that's Okabe Rintaro. And then, of course, you know, you can include his exchange, his moment with Nai, right? Yeah, I mean, how nice was that? How beautiful was that? His handling of it, right? But then, you know, the thing is, you know, I speak of the heart of gold shining through, the real Okabe Rintaro shining through. You see that right then and there in that scene, you know, the contrasting reads and understandings of Okarin, right? On one end, you've got Amane Suzuha, and then on the other, you've got his lifelong friend, his bestie, his best friend, right? Childhood friend in Mayuri. And Mayuri, I think above all, has the greatest and most comprehensive understanding of Okabe Rintaro. She gets Okabe Rintaro at a level that is just simply not possible for anyone else, right? It's just not. And, you know, you can flip it as well, right? Okabe has a really unique and special relationship with Mayuri. It's showcased in quite a striking manner as well, right? As he gets one of those messages again, those ominous messages. This one's actually a bit more creepy than the last as well, given the severed doll head. And, they've actually gone through the effort of putting on fake blood on it as well. And whoever they is or are still remains to be quite an exciting, mystery element of this as well, right? That it is kind of still allowing some speculation. I can't just straight out say, oh, this is certain for sure. And of course, I'll come back to that, because there's a lot of room for theory crafting and speculation, a lot of exciting thoughts and ideas and revelations, official confirmations and all of that to explore in this episode's discussion, post-episode analysis portion here. But yeah, the moment he got that message, that striking art style switch up, my goodness, the Sakuga, I believe that is Sakuga, right? And it's unique because it's just so rare, right? The animation and the art style of this anime, and the look as a whole, and just the atmosphere of it, it's really quite deliberate. It has been really quite deliberate for 11 episodes, right? I love it. I love the aesthetic of it. But here, you just really truly kind of get to feel, or kind of get to go inside of Okurin's head, go inside of his mind, even though 11 episodes in, you kind of actually get to see quite a bit of that, or get to experience quite a bit of that. Hell, given some of the revelations and setups in this episode, I might be getting even more of that as far as memory travel is concerned. And of course, I am speaking of this new concept of the time leap, right? Wow, yeah. I don't want to deviate too much before I kind of finish up my point here. I mean, of course, it's incredibly striking visually in its presentation, right? And really, really impressive. And again, this kind of goes back to my initial point about the perfect balance, striking the perfect balance. That applies to the production side of things as well, right? Yes, sometimes it can be quite functional and quite, serviceable. But for the most part, it's really, really consistent. It has been. And again, those elements, the production elements, just continue to impress so much. The sound design, the original score. Now, the thing is, I had this question. Now I'm kind of remembering it. I'm thinking of the, of the game itself. If any of this, as far as, the score is concerned, and perhaps even the sound design elements, if any of it is actually kind of crossing over from the game. It'd be interesting to kind of find out. I mean, I can just find out by myself, once the anime is done, and I can maybe just even go into the game myself and try it out and, kind of have that experience as well. I think there's a high likelihood that I'll play the game as well at some point. But yeah, here in this striking art style switch up, you really kind of get to feel that anxiety, that panic, that state of tunnel vision at that point in time, that the only thing that matters is Mayuri and Mayuri only, right? He knew that Makise is there as well, but at that point, he's only thinking about Mayuri. It just so effectively communicates his state of mind, right? At that moment, it's quite literally black and white. The only thing that matters is Mayuri, and everything else just kind of loses its color. It loses its meaning. And yeah, I bet at that moment in time, he probably doesn't even realize how exactly he made it back to the lab, right? A lot of us, or all of us, have probably experienced it at some point or another. You're driving home, right? And somehow you find yourself just kind of pulling in, and you kind of realize, I don't actually recall any of that drive. I mean, of course, it can be concerning. It's a little bit dangerous, but I don't know. Sometimes it's that phenomenon that happens, right? You're safe. You're driving. You're alert, but you're not alert at the same time, right? It's like almost kind of like muscle memory, and you're driving safely. But by the time you pull in, it's almost as if there's that time that's missing, right? But yeah, you can just see that by the time he gets into the lab, and of course, they make it a point to focus on him grabbing the key. And again, the key's not really stored at the most ideal location. It's kind of like right there, And, of course, they show us, they made it a point to show us that he retrieves the key from there specifically, right? And how easy it is to actually, grab that key. Or if someone is to look for that key, they probably could find it. Right. But, the point being, by the time he does make it, into the living room, into the lab itself, and he's standing there. Right. And there, there's even a bit of a dolly zoom effect there. I think, I might have to go back to it, but, I thought it was really, really quite effective in that moment as well. But yeah, as he's just frozen there for a moment in time. Right. He doesn't react to anything. He's just kind of breathing heavy. And then, of course, slowly, the sounds of the bath, the running water just kind of, kicks in. And I suppose, it kind of breaks the tension, and that is the purpose of it. But, it's that clash of, I don't know, man. It's just that clash of styles in that moment, I suppose, from such a panic-induced, terrifying moment to that, it just kind of just slices it in half, doesn't it? A bit of comedic relief or a moment of levity at that moment. And yeah, bit of an anime moment, if I'm being quite honest there. But the clashing of styles is actually really quite spot on there, really quite fitting given Okurin or Okabe Rintaro's or Hyoen Kiyoma's own clashing styles, right? You see it on display in all its glory, right? As I said, it's classic Okabe Rintaro, or rather classic Kiyoma, right? As he addresses and tactfully actually handles the situation with Makise at the playground. And again, I'll come back to that. That's actually a really significant portion of this episode. It kind of, finally confirms something that's actually been, building up and foreshadowed for some time now, Makise Kurisu and her potential fractured relationship with her father, right? Okurin actually picked up on it some time ago. You go back to that great episode of them actually going on that little field trip to the shrine to retrieve the IBN 5100, right? There, he noticed that, okay, she there is something about her and, I don't know, relationships with your parents, or in this specific case, a father-daughter relationship. And, in the grand scheme of things, much like many other, really unique dynamics, father-daughter relationships are rather special. They are. It's been clear that she longs for that relationship, right? Just quite recently, she's the one who kept reiterating, no. I'm sure, Suzuha and her father are having a great time, a good time right now, bonding, right? She's the one who stops Okurin from tailing her, right? Because she understands. She's probably thought at this moment in her mind 100 times, who knows, thousands of times, right? Patching things up, right? With her own father and how she would do it, how she would approach it. Once the time comes, or if the time comes, if the opportunity presents itself. And, like I said, Okabe, he really, I think he's really quite impressive in that scene, right? In how he handles that. And, the thing is, I actually kind of discussed the possibility of, her potentially even overlooking some things, perhaps, for a chance to reconcile, right? And, then this whole notion of, Suzuha, always being quite concerned and quite standoffish, right? About Makise Kurisu and her proximity, or close proximity even, to the lab itself, or even more specifically, Okabe Rintaro, right? To the point that she always tries to, give him a heads up. And here, finally, she just came out and said it, right? She's working for CERN. She just simply could not take it anymore? Or is this a strategic point in time or moment in time that, almost kind of like predetermined, that she knew she's actually, no, you can't really predetermine that. Or not that specific moment. Predetermined as in, okay, maybe one of these days, I have to actually cross that bridge and mention it and say it, right? Bring it to his attention. And she does that, right? She does that. Now, of course, as an audience member, I can firmly just, say that no, she's not. At this point in time, she's simply not, working with CERN or a spy for CERN or all of that. She's just not. Even she is quite baffled just at the notion of it. But again, the unique element of all of this is that Amane Suzuha is a time traveler, right? And the really unique thing about this, and isn't it interesting that this is actually the unique aspect of it, she's actually a traditional time travel, right? I've believed that for some time now, and the anime itself has not really been subtle about it. And I do believe, it's not even about believing it anymore. They actually just showed me, right, the satellite that's been launched into the side of the radio building. That's her physical time machine. So, at some point in time, they do crack the physical time travel problem, right? As I've seen it on display essentially since episode 1, right? Amane Suzuha. It's all a matter of not yet. Listen, before I go any further, is there a slim chance that Suzuha is, again, taking a bit of a strategic approach because, again, she might have been briefed to take this approach, right? From her own future that she comes from and the people she's with, right? Though, again, a lot of those people or some of those people that she knows, though it doesn't sound like it's a fun time or anything, these could be people I already know, right? That I've been watching for maybe 11 episodes now. So maybe it could be just something strategic as well. Like I said in the last episode's discussion as well, there's always going to be this element of directives and, taking someone down a really specific path, guiding someone down a really specific path, right? That they might not understand at this point in time, but it is going to make sense. As crazy and as, unthinkable as it might seem, at some point it's going to click. And it is going to make sense, right? You see that a lot in time travel narratives. But I think ultimately, it probably is a case of, okay, for some reason, right? For some reason, she, and by she I mean Makise Kurisu, is going to find herself under the banner of CERN, right? Now, that's not me claiming or saying that, she's defecting or anything, or, she's going to just have this incredible heel turn or something. But yeah, at the end of the day, since Suzuha is a time traveler, I am going to believe her. This is someone you kind of have to trust. They have the bigger picture in mind. But that being said, there's always some crucial things that they kind of sneak in. Episodes ago at this point, they made it clear that even in the future, right? Now that's something I had to extract myself, but essentially, it's from that scene of Suzuha saying, I've never actually met Makise Kurisu before, right? And of course, Suzuha is speaking from her perspective as a time traveler. So I just assume she means that she hasn't even met her in the future. So she just knows, she has knowledge, right? That Makise is under the CERN banner. She's with CERN. She's working for CERN. Though, you see that Okurin takes that as, okay, she could be a potential double agent or she's a spy for CERN. And of course, for a moment, Okurin is concerned, right? And he's being a little bit sneaky, trying to, just observe Makise Kurisu and her behavior. And if anything seems out of the ordinary, if anything seems a little bit fishy, a little bit shady. But the thing is, he's such a great judge of character, in this case at least, right? Because I still believe how his handling of someone like Kiryu Moeka has been really, really quite concerning. Concerning in the sense that, he's been just a bit too laid back about the whole thing. I think I use the term laissez-faire. Once again, I think that's present in this episode as well. That, this attitude, that this laid back attitude and them just not being careful enough, it's going to bite them in the ass. And, by the end of this episode, you see Okurin, the stress in his face as you get that tight shot of him. The walls are closing in. Like I said, the jaws are closing in. I mean, by the time, Daru confirms that it appears that they're connected to the heart of CERN. I mean, as you saw in my reaction, I at that point, I just felt this immediate sense of dread just, washing over me. right? Much like it does for Okirin as well. But you can see, I think, right? He doesn't say anything, but you could just see, again, in the way it's drawn and animated, the stress in his face. He also understands that it might just be too late at this point, right? I mean, if you look at it from a realistic standpoint, just then and there, all of them, they should have just dumped everything. They should have just canceled all these plans and just, purge. And yes, even then, it probably is too late, but, it's crazy that they just kind of continue, right? But again, you have to allow a bit of that, right? It is a story, right? It's story logic, and you just simply have to allow a bit of that. But again, if you look at the scene itself, it's just, it's a bit of a head scratcher. Some of their behavior, especially maybe someone like even Daru, I kind of expected someone like Daru to just be really quite panicked in that moment, but he's just really quite chill about the whole thing, right? Even after just kind of, bringing up red flag after red flag, right? He straight up just tells them they essentially just let us in, because Daru does understand that this is really off, right? And he understands that essentially, they've been hoping for this. He even said something like, "Oh, it's almost as if CERN was on pins and needles, just kind of hoping for this or waiting for this for them." As you remember, all that time ago, this is in the first few episodes, right? Around the time Daru is hacking, right? And is successfully able to hack at least the first component of that, right? And then, there's that mix up about the IBM 5100 being required to get further in to the Jellyman's report and actually getting the details of that, the different people and the different years they're sent to and all of that. But that was kind of cleared up for me. Apparently, it's just the anime or the adaptation kind of slipping up a bit, right? Mixing things up a bit. Apparently, it's not really something they actually required to get in or to, get into that part of the report, the Jellyman's report in the game. But in the anime, they decided that you do need the IBM 5100. But then, of course, in the world line that they do not have the IBM 5100, Makise Kurisu knows all about the Jellyman and the Gelmans and, the consequences of trying physical time travel. Hell, she brings it up again in this episode, right? And then she has, again, the light bulb moment that maybe you can't do physical time travel. You can't physically send people into the past, but you could send their memories. You could implant their memories into a past self, right? It's exciting stuff. It's exciting stuff. But yeah, I just kind of expected Daru to be a bit more panicked. There's just too many red flags here. As an audience member, it's just so clear cut to me that this is just really, really bad at this point, right? And that, sooner or later, but I'd say at this point, given again these revelations, probably sooner rather than later, CERN is going to put something into motion, right? It's been building, and now in this episode, it's been the most clear-cut indication that, CERN's been around. They've always been around. They essentially did guide them in. They let them in quite easily. And they've been watching this whole time. And again, that's not the biggest shock, right? It's almost kind of like an expectation given, again, that it's confirmed a long time ago that, CERN is the one who monopolized time travel in the future, a dystopian future and all of that. So my expectation for a long time has always been that sooner or later, CERN is going to be making a move or putting things into motion. But for now, or, up until this point, they've been hanging back because they need some of these things to happen. They need some of these things to play out. That, they do need the Future Gadgets Lab. They do need Makise Kurisu and Okabe Rintaro and all of the other people to perform these experiments, to go through these moments, to get to a certain point. Because like I've stated episodes ago at this point, there's some incredible things, historic things, groundbreaking things actually taking place in that Future Gadgets Lab, right? Above the CRT shop. The CRT repair shop. And how about that? That's just brilliant, man. That's brilliant. It just, the moment it clicks, it's just so perfect. So perfect. The moment Okirin realizes as well, and it's clear that, okay, it has something to do with the CRT, the 42-inch incher specifically, apparently. And, that 42-inch CRT is a bit of a behemoth, man. That's it's a totally different ball game in comparison to a 42-incher now, And ultimately that ends up being the lifter, or, that functions as a lifter, or something within that CRT, or the functionality of the CRT functions as a lifter, right? And 12 to 6 checks out immediately because those are store hours, most likely. And around, in that time frame, in that time span, that CRT is on, right, at all times, I'm guessing, right? Because again, most of the time, in these types of shops, even now, if you think of like a Best Buy, those televisions are always on, right, to show off the capabilities of the screen itself. But yeah, it's been right there. And, there's been moments, even just quite recently, Mr. Braun said something like, oh, the 42-incher is still in pieces, right? But doesn't that imply that it's actually broken or broken down and it's being fixed? Or it was Amane Suzuha's job at that point in time, even though she was slacking and he found out because Nai kind of slipped up, right? And Okabe had to kind of, get himself out of that situation because it looked kind of bad, just him and Nai standing there. Yeah, he said the 42-incher is in pieces. So I assumed even then that, it's Amane Suzuha who's actually just working on it and that she is quite proficient with the CRTs. Now, see, I said at that point, isn't that interesting? Let me kind of build on that. It actually does become even more interesting now because, again, Amane Suzuha is a time traveler, right? And now it makes... It just completely checks out. It's actually more so of just an official confirmation. Of course, she came to the CRT shop for a really specific reason. She has knowledge of this, right? The CRT shop itself, or the CRT functionality as a lifter, and then of course, it being below the Future Gadgets Lab and all of that, right? Perfect placement. But yeah, going back to this notion of their system being connected to the heart of CERN to the point that now they can actually even use the LHC, and according to Daru, they can use it all they want at this point, right? It's like, at that point, of course, you would think that's a major red flag that they do have access to this. And as you saw in my reaction, of course, this isn't something they should actually, try to implement. They shouldn't actually try to use it. But of course, like I said, you have to allow a few of these things, right? You can't always look at it from the most realistic standpoint, right? If you do, then, realistically, everything should be shut down here. They should get out of that place. They should just, just get out of here, right? Shut everything down as much as they can. But of course, now they have access to the LHC. And see, this aspect of it, they don't dwell on it too much. They kind of almost brush over it, this insane notion that they're directly attached or connected to the heart of CERN to the point that, again, they've got the Hadron Collider at their fingertips. And isn't that just so perfect? Isn't that just so ideal, given the fact that just earlier, Maki Sekurisu said that at the moment, the phone microwave probably isn't powerful enough to compress all of that data, right? But the LHC, I'm guessing that is more than enough, or at least, substantial enough, right? For the purposes of this time leap machine that Maki Sekurisu is on the cusp of building. But like, even from a logical standpoint, isn't anyone going to think about that, just the notion of, okay, if you can just use the LHC, of course, CERN over there in Switzerland, they're going to know it's in use, that someone is accessing it, right? So, there's a bit of a leap in logic here. Again, they haven't done it yet. So maybe I should hold up for a second here, but Daru has essentially set it up that they've got it at their fingertips now, right? And they actually do have a use for it, immediate use for it, in the buildup of the time leap functionality, right? The compression aspect of it. Because again, their current equipment is not quite, powerful enough. It's as simple as that. And at just the right time, they've gained access, or they've learned that they have access to this, to the Hadron Collider. So like I said a little bit earlier, you could kind of look at it as CERN essentially facilitating, right? Everything that they might need here to execute on these plans, on, again, some of these incredible things that are going on here, right? And at this point, the next in line appears to be the time leap machine. But, as I am on the topic of CERN, let's look at these messages that Okurin's been getting, these warnings, right? Again, the most intimidating one yet, right? The decapitated head of the doll that immediately makes him think of Mayuri, right? And, once again, it just kind of reiterates his concern all that time ago that, he brought Mayuri into all of this. I think this is back in episode 6, around the time she tells him, good job. I'm happy that all of the experiments, worked out. And he's got that beautiful smile on his face, right? It's that moment I'll never forget of just how much it means, just that coming from Mayuri. And then he immediately realizes he's brought Mayuri into all of this now, right? And then I think the next day he's outside of the shop as well, thinking about the same thing as he's looking at the jello, right? And then, of course, Kiryu Moika comes in. But, speaking of Kiryu Moika, just a quick cameo appearance, and, she's just being her usual ominous self, right? Just really, really kind of dialed in and locked in on Okurin. And, Okurin, once again, kind of gave up some critical information, right? It is Mayuri who straight up just kind of tells her. But again, you can't really blame Mayuri too much here, because here she is meant to be, or is considered a lab member, even though she's not around at all, right? And yeah, it's just everything about her is still kind of concerning. Not kind of concerning, it is. Even here, once she finds out about the potential functionality of the time leap, right? Sending memories back in time, or implanting memories, you see it's a bit of a light bulb moment for her as well, right? Once that information registered, and she just walks off, and you see she's immediately messaging as well, back on her phone. So, nothing good, nothing about that felt right, or felt like, oh, okay, see you, Moika. No. But, here's my take on the messages that Okurin has been receiving, that, I'm watching you, that you know too much. And then again, the PNG attachments. And, it kind of looked like it said losers, right? It didn't spell it out, of course, specifically as losers. But if you look at it, it just kind of looked like it said losers. And of course, the first attachment is the red jello, and this time it's a decapitated head of a doll, right? Fake blood and everything. My take on this is that I don't actually think this is CERN. Because, CERN, why exactly is CERN going to give Okurin a heads up, or even, step in this capacity? My understanding, and again, as showcased here in the ending as well, is that CERN, wants them to have access. They want them to, potentially now use the LHC, right, for this critical component, right, in the functionality of the time leap now, perhaps. So I just don't see how anyone at CERN is going to be giving Okurin a heads up twice. And essentially, I think that's, what it is. It's a heads up, right? I think this is someone that is looking out for Okurin, right? Someone from Okurin's side, essentially. Letting him know, okay, listen, man, you've got to be careful here, or not even that, because this idea, maybe you could still, pull back, or you have to be careful. It might be, or it essentially is too late for that anyways, perhaps. But essentially, it's this idea, or it could be this idea of getting Okurin ready, right? Putting this in his mind, letting him know, okay, I don't know, man. Hell, maybe it could be an attempt to make him actually back off and ease up, right? And that kind of goes directly into the next point. This notion of Okurin just not sharing any information, like at all. You would think once he gets that message, specifically, and then he just essentially flies home, right? And finds out once he opens the door. And of course, it's a really embarrassing situation for for Mayuri, for Makise, and Okurin as well. But you have to give him a pass here,
right? He's not looking to do anything like that. He simply had to make sure, you know, for all he knows, there could be 2 dead bodies, right? Mayuri could be dead in there or something. You know, the water's just left running, right? But of course, you know, it just immediately cuts the tension and all of that in that manner. You know, that's the approach that's taken here. Now, you know, I said it's a bit of an anime moment, and it is, but I am aware that, you know, public bath or, you know, sharing a bath it's a common thing in Japan, right? I'm not sure how common it still might be now in this day and age, but I know it's always been a thing, you know, hot springs and, you know, kind of going to these places together. So I suppose that kind of applies to like a home bath as well, you know, that it's not taboo. And the thing is, both Makise and Mayuri almost immediately realize that, okay, that wasn't his intention and that he's going through something here, right? They both see it, and they both actually even understand that, you know, it's because of something on his phone. You know, Mayuri kind of tries to get a peek, but he immediately pulls it back. And then Makise also said something like, did something happen on your phone? Right? But again, Okurin keeps it to himself, much like how earlier in the episode he slips up, right? And he talks about, you know, the transformative nature of, you know, that one D-mail that Ferris sent out, you know, the elusive Ferris. I mean, I haven't seen her since. And again, that's a bit strange. Now it's a bit strange that there's still no Ferris after her D-mail had this much of a substantial impact, to then just have no Ferris at all. I do think it's a bit puzzling at this point to not have Ferris at all since then. But yeah, you know, he slips up and then Mayuri is a little bit confused and then he just kind of moves on, right? Immediately moves on, doesn't want to actually go any further. So yeah, you know, for a couple of episodes now, you know, I've been talking about how Okurin just does not seem to be sharing anything anymore, even though it's been quite clear that he has been sharing information. But at this point, you know, it could also be this idea of, okay, you know, out of embarrassment, you know, just how much things have gotten out of hand, right? How much things have changed. And then again, on top of that, you've got these messages, and this could be the intended effect of the messages as well. You know, he's now even more concerned and he doesn't want any of them to be brought into this or any more from this point on. So, you know, he's making the choice, again, as the leader of the Future Gadgets Lab, to, you know, essentially take full responsibility here and protect his lab members, right? That could be at play here, that he's going to take on that burden, that responsibility, and he doesn't want them getting mixed up anymore into any of this. But again, it's already far too late for all of that, right? That's so clear to see at this point. It's all catching up and the walls are closing in. They are. And, you know, some of these things, just the notion of some of these things is a little bit terrifying. Now, before I move on, you know, once again, it's just insane. It's just incredibly insane that, you know, they are essentially connected to the heart of CERN. I mean, how's that even possible? How? Right? The logistics of it, the functionality of it, right? I mean, am I even looking at them? I mean, I really don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that there's been people inside of that lab, right? Like certain people, or even if it's just one person, there might have been someone inside of that lab at some point to facilitate this, right? I don't know, man. It's so bizarre, this whole idea of being connected at that or in that capacity to CERN, right? In Switzerland. It's just a really uneasy thought. Just the whole idea, the notion of it. But yeah, let's kind of shift the focus to the time leap, the concept of the time leap. You know, Makise Kirisu said physically sending someone is pretty much out of the question, right? Again, at this point in time, at least, you know my thoughts on Suzuha and her method of time travel. But it might be possible, and again, now I'm going back to Makise Kirisu, it might be possible to send their memory data. So that, you know, that kind of kicks off this whole idea of the time leap, you know, sending their memory data back to their past self. And, you know, immediately the question becomes, how far back can you send it, right? Because surely there's got to be a limit to how far back you can send it, because, you know, you can't send it so far back that, you know, the functionality is just not possible in that time frame, right? And I'm thinking like, if you send it decades back or to a time period, or I mean that time period, it has to go back to someone's past self. So it has to be within that range, but you're not going to send it to like a kid version of them either, right? But essentially, my train of thought here is that surely the memories have to be implanted into someone's past self. And even that right there is kind of, I don't know, man, kind of insane, because someone's going to have to step up, someone's going to have to step in and go through this, right? If they actually want to, test it out and see the functionality for themselves and see if it is successful. I mean, that's not a bridge I have to cross at the moment, but it's going to have to get there, right? Now that they've set up the idea of the time leap, someone is going to have to use it, right? Of course, given the nature of this anime, the immediate thought is always Okabe Rintaro, right? Again, given his own experiences, his ongoing experiences with the D-mails and the reading Steiner ability and all of that. But essentially, you can't really send it so far back that the memories from the future, memories of the future, just don't make sense to that person, to that past self, right? So I'm guessing it has to be within a time frame, where it is going to kind of make sense to get those memories, right? That, you can kind of connect the dots rather than it going too far back and these memories just feeling really quite bizarre and not even being able to connect the dots and knowing the meaning of some of these memories, right? And again, one of the main components of this is compression, right? So on the flip side, this has to decompress as well. And again, immediately in my mind, I'm kind of thinking about the actual visual indicator and just the actual look of it, because again, I've been experiencing reading Steiner alongside Okarin for some time now, right? So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and assume that there is going to be some kind of visual indicator. And what exactly does that even look like? Someone receiving, and again, let's use an example here as Okarin. What exactly is that going to look like and feel like? And if indeed it does end up being Okabe Rintaro, there's that extra bit of, spice, right? Given his really unique, composition, given his really unique ability, his unique condition, right? The all-seeing eye reading Steiner. How did these two potentially kind of function together, right? Can they function together? I mean, yeah, they can, but yeah, if you think about it from Okabe Rintaro's perspective, possibly experiencing this, it's a bit different than anyone else experiencing it, right? But if it is someone else experiencing it, how exactly is that going to affect Okabe, right? And then again, reading Steiner, because you simply have to think about the shift to a different timeline, to a different world line, right? But see, here's the thing. Here's a really unique aspect of it. If I'm understanding this correctly, right? This is not meant to be jumping to a different timeline or anything. This is actually, it is a type of time travel, right? But it's unique. It's unique because it's actually sending those memories back. But again, they send memories, not your consciousness. There is a distinction there. So essentially, I guess it's more so just having information ahead of time, right? Receiving information ahead of time, right? Receiving experiences ahead of time, knowing how certain things played out, right? So, in that sense, yeah, I can see that use of it, right? Knowing how something happened, but then, trying to go back or being in that situation, time leap situation, and trying to maybe, deviate from a specific path, right? Use a different plan of action, perhaps based on, again, the knowledge you have received, the memories you have received of your future self. And again, the things surrounding your future self. But, going back to my point about timeline shifting and the world line shifting and all of that, this is actually meant to remain, right? This is my understanding of it as of this point. This should be in the same timeline, right? Now, I'm trying to think. If someone else actually uses the time leap, No, see, that's the thing. It's possible. It's possible, that if someone else is using the time leap, that, Ocarine might actually initiate reading Steiner, right? Or reading Steiner might initiate because of, some potential substantial or significant changes after or the moment, those memories are sent back. But if it is Ocarine, and again, given that he's a protagonist, that is a high likelihood here. But I think ultimately there could be multiple characters that might actually experience the time leap, right? My assumption at this point is that yes, it is going to be successful, and it is going to be put into effect, right, at some point in the near future, even, right? That is the expectation at this point. So if Ocarine is to use the time leap, then there's that whole idea of, it's a really good point that Mayuri actually brings up. What happens to your current self? Memories. A part of me thought, oh, are you brain dead all of a sudden? But I don't think that's the case here. Do you feel like there's something missing? Do you feel like there is time missing, right? Those memories just kind of leave your mind, right? As if they never happened or they didn't exist because those memories are now given or implanted into your past self. Or is it essentially kind of like, or it functions kind of like as just a copy, right? A copy of those memories. But no, they didn't say anything about copies though, right? My understanding is that it's taking those memories and just sending those memories back. Compressing them, of course, and then sending them back, through the functionality of a D-mail message. But if you look at it from the perspective of, the past self that is receiving these memories of the future or from the future, of, their future selves, it's explained, and I kind of had to go back and actually look at that, diagram that Maki Sekirisa drew up. There it specified that it's actually overwritten, right? And that was actually going to be one of my questions until I did go back and got that information again. How exactly does that function, right? Is it just kind of added on to their existing memories? And they, of course, they have that person, that past self has their entire lived experience, plus these memories of the future, right? That was kind of my understanding of it, but they specify that it gets overwritten. But here's the thing, right? It doesn't really matter, the verbiage of it. I suppose I shouldn't get hung up on that idea of overwritten because, I hear that and I think of reading Steiner, because anytime our Ocarine is exempt from the memory reconstruction aspect of it, he takes over another Ocarine, right? It's been a talking point. I'd say quite a heated talking point recently as well in my discussions. That Ocarine, it just ceases to exist, and our Ocarine overtakes, right? Overwrites. And from our Ocarine's perspective, there's a gap. He's always catching up. He's playing catch up because he doesn't have those experiences of the Ocarine he kind of jumped into or took over. But yeah, switching back to the time leap aspect of it, much like, the D-mails and, again, reading Steiner as well, I'm going to go ahead and assume there are going to be limitations. Limitations are good, right? They are. So maybe I shouldn't be too concerned about the, overriding aspect of it. And that ultimately, it's the experiences of the future self are going to be close enough, most likely. Essentially, I just kind of have to, see it play out, right? Actually get to experience it and then kind of go from there, right? Based on the information I get, based on whoever ends up experiencing it. And also, excuse me, I said decompress, I think, on a couple of occasions. They have to uncompress. But, this kind of has me thinking. This is a little bit out there, but, this idea of memories, right? Implanting memories. It's, the notion of that is not new. I've seen stuff like that before, but, I'm thinking of the possibility of perhaps, okay, again, a hypothetical, a what if scenario. What if a memory or these memories of the future, from the future, don't actually end up implanted or end up being implanted into the past self of the exact same person? If that's even a thing that's possible, could those memories exist in another form? I mean, can those memories be accessed in a different form or through a different form? Or is it just as clear cut as, okay, these memories have to be implanted into that really specific past self. Otherwise, it's not going to just function at all. But, the follow-up scene of Okurin and Mayuri talking it out, right? Kind of having a back and forth. It's a great scene. And, it's kind of brought on by Mayuri. She's the one kind of driving this conversation about the mechanics of it, right? Mayuri, I've said it before as well, she can be quite insightful, right? That emotional insight. And again, she has that clarity that the others are not able to have at times because, they're preoccupied with other thoughts, other immediate concerns. But again, in Mayuri's case, a lot of it is about her being especially attentive to how all of these things are affecting Okurin, right? She's noticed. It's been an ongoing theme. She's noticed that Okurin is not quite the same, right? There's a really sad moment back at the, it feels like a lifetime ago at this point, back at the Maid Cafe, right? In the changing area, as Ferris and Mayuri are talking about it, she said that she doesn't really like it, the use of the D-mail, and that, ultimately Okurin, or it feels like Okurin is going further and further away from her. And even here, I think, her concern actually stems from, connections and real feelings and these bonds. And you see that she is quite sad at the idea of an Okurin just not remembering a conversation with her, right? So, in her mind, it's this idea that, some version of her kind of loses an Okabe, right? And then again, on the flip side, a version of Okabe loses that with Mayuri, right? She's thinking it from that perspective. And, during that conversation, this idea of control comes up, doesn't it? Listen, man, I've seen enough of these types of narratives to know, that's just an illusion. The idea of control, that you think you'll have control in these situations. I don't know, man. Like I said, I just kind of have to see it play out, once someone does experience the time leap. But I'm expecting that, this idea of maintaining some level of control or more control than the D-mail, it's just not going to be the case. I mean, I love to say it, but, time itself is undefeated. It can be undefeated. And the universe itself is undefeated. And then, I brought up this idea of anchor events back in episode 1's discussion. Perhaps some things are just meant to be, right? Some things simply cannot be changed, right? And, I bring this idea up because, this is going to be a bit different than the many worlds interpretation, if indeed reading Steiner does not take effect, right? Again, this is kind of, I suppose, specific to Okurin potentially going through a time leap phenomenon. But yeah, this scene is followed up by them, running into Suzuha and Nai, right? Because Nai has been looking for Okurin all over the place because ultimately she felt bad. And like I said, it must have looked really scary. Her dad's a big guy, Mr. Braun. And, Okurin caught a beatdown. He caught a beating. I'm not even sure if it's just one punch or he legit just took a couple of punches, right? That must have looked scary, right? And yeah, Nai felt that it was a bit harsh. Even though they've set up that, she's not the biggest fan of Okabe Rintaro. She's a little bit afraid of Okabe anytime he's around. But, even so, she felt the need to apologize, right? I'm sorry my dad was so mean to you earlier, right? But, I love how Okabe handles this. Okurin's approach was to reassure her that her dad did nothing wrong. That's the immediate thought process at that moment, right? That no, your dad's not in the wrong. It's fine, it's okay. That he was within his right to do that to me, because I've been giving him a tough time. So, fair enough now that they're even. But, I loved how he handled that he wanted to reassure that, no, don't be upset. Your father did nothing wrong. It's okay, right? And you see immediately Nai just kind of lights up, right? That, oh, okay, it's good. He's not, He's not upset. He's not sad. He's fine. And again, like I stated a little bit earlier, or in the beginning of this analysis portion, there's the contrasting reactions to Okurin's behavior or approach with Nai. We see that Suzuha didn't think that this is like Okabe Rintaro, like at all, right? And then, of course, Mayuri's a little bit confused about that reading of Okabe's approach here. And she said, oh, I mean, Okurin's always like this, right? And then you see, or you hear a bit of a reaction from Suzuha off screen, right? She's a little bit confused about that. So, right there, you see once again just how unique that relationship is. That understanding that Mayuri has of the real Okabe Rintaro. But again, to be fair, Suzuha doesn't really get to see that side of Okabe, right? So it makes sense. But again, you can also kind of look at it from the time traveler Suzuha perspective, that again, there's a possibility she might know older Okurin, a future Okurin as well. I mean, yeah, that's certainly a possibility, especially given the fact that there's actually a possibility that Daru could be her father, right? There is a possibility of that. So, again, Daru and Okurin, good friends. But again, I don't know how exactly things play out for them in the future, right? Leading up to this dystopian future. If they are an active, part of this dystopian future with Suzuha. And that brings us to the confirmation of the fractured relationship between Makise Kurisu and her father, right? Yeah, this is, again, not the biggest shocker. They've been setting that up. They've been alluding to it, foreshadowing it, that she longs for that type of relationship. She's, from the sounds of it, she had it. Growing up, she had it. But then, again, with time, after, certain significant turning points in her development, again, as a young genius, a prodigy, it had a bit of an effect, right? It had a bit of an effect on the father, and then in turn, the relationship. Ultimately, she feels that unknowingly, she really hurt his pride. A thing that's kind of clear here is that, Makise Kurisu actually takes a lot of the blame, or maybe even all of the blame for this. And it feels like she still kind of carries a lot of regret, right? And again, the weight of that blame that she or the responsibility that she took for all of this, even though it's kind of clear that, her father, this man, has a lot of issues, his own issues that led to this, right? But, of course, from Makise Kurisu's perspective, it's clearly all about how could I have avoided this? But, by the time she understood that, okay, I've been really hurting his pride, it's already a bit too late at that point, right? Because he's already kind of too far gone. I mean, this man completely flunked his role as a father, I believe, right? He wasn't up for it. Instead of being incredibly proud of his daughter, it essentially landed on the other side, right? Being threatened by her achievements, right? Being paranoid, being fickle, imposter syndrome. He felt upstaged. And again, I have seen this trope of the child surpassing the parent before, but again, in a lot of cases, it's presented in a positive light. And the thing is, it appears that it wasn't always like that, right? Because again, she ends up on this trajectory because of her father, right? Because she's inspired. She was inspired by her father, right? She told Okurin as much, that, when she was little, she loved hearing him just talk about these complicated, physics. It was inspirational for her. And again, young kids look up to their fathers, and in this case, a young daughter really looked up to her father. And, because of this, and again, this idea of her being this prodigy and genius, and listen, I'm not sure how realistic this actually is, her actually being able to understand his papers before she was in middle school. I think that's the line of dialogue there. I don't know how realistic that is, but, for the sake of the story, I think, yeah, you can accept it. But ultimately, I think it is clear that she was inspired by him, right? That he molded his daughter, right? And in a positive sense, right? She loved that he was passionate about his craft, about his profession. I mean, from the sounds of it, at one point, it's actually quite a positive, dynamic duo type relationship, father and daughter, right? Emailing back and forth, sharing papers and debating about these papers. But, then came the turning point. At some point, he stopped. He just simply stopped talking to her because, again, she kept disproving his theories. And you see that his pride, his ego, it took a hit. It just did. But there's also this really interesting bit about him just being abandoned by academia. And again, this is in relation to his confidence being shot, right? But, again, this kind of takes me back to the laundromat. Her kind of really being against this whole notion of, time machines, or that, at that lab, at the Future Gadgets lab, the D-mail phenomenon and, again, the banana, gel nana and all of that, it blew her mind. And, she simply had to get out of there at that moment. I still remember how defensive she was about that. And, there's a really significant line of dialogue. I don't want to make the same mistakes my father made, right? So maybe that's another reason, that kind of plays into this whole notion of being abandoned by academia, right? But, that was in relation to time travel. The notion, the idea, the mechanics, the possibility of time travel. So, yeah, up until this point, I thought her father, you can go back to that discussion. I think I'm pretty sure I really focused on, okay, maybe her father is someone who really believed in time travel and mechanics. Or maybe now in hindsight, maybe the thing she said there, that I don't want to make the same mistakes as my father. Maybe she's talking about her future self and possibly having kids of her own and not repeating those mistakes, right? But I don't know, I think there it actually might have been about, potential time travel, I don't know, chat, mechanics, research, possibility, and all of that, right? Now, in terms of who her father could be, am I looking at a brand new character? It's possible. It's possible. But listen, man, I'm almost at the midpoint. I don't know how likely and how feasible a brand new character is at this point, especially given that it's a time travel narrative, right? And a lot of times you kind of have the cast that you're going to be with, right, at different points in time, at different ages and all of that, kind of present from day one or from the first couple of episodes and all of that. But I think in this unique case, it could be a character that hasn't been shown yet, right? It's not even a given that it is going to be a character that is going to be shown on screen, even though, of course, both Okarin and again, now Makise, who is on board after Okarin so tactfully brought up that notion of, possibly meeting her father, going on that trip. And, later she said something about securing tickets for an overnight bus to that place. Yeah, maybe it doesn't even have to be an actual character that I'll see on screen, because listen, as far as existing characters go, there's only really one. There's legitimately only one that's left. And I spoke of this character in the last episode as well, Dr. Nakabachi. There I kind of brought it up as a possibility of being, Suzaha's dad, right? One of the possibilities. I see, that being said, I do see Makise Kurisu and Dr. Nakabachi in the same room in episode 1. But of course, there's no interaction there at all. She came in, or Makise Kurisu came in and pulled that Okarin out of that room. Okay, if it does end up being an existing character, Dr. Nakabachi has to be a possibility. But, I'll be honest, it's not something I really thought about. Oh, this could be Makise Kurisu's dad, Just doesn't feel like that would be her dad. But again, the things that she's describing about her dad and the things I described about her dad, that he clearly has issues of his own, maybe, it's a possibility. Let's keep an open mind, I suppose. And again, I suppose in that moment he is, being accused of plagiarism, kind of taking on the John Teeter narrative and take on time travel. But if you ask me, I'm kind of hoping it's more so of just like an off-screen character, right? Just a new character that I haven't met yet. But yeah, like I mentioned on a few occasions now, I love Okarin's approach here, right? And he is really attentive, right? You see that it had a bit of an impact on him as well. And there's that lovely moment, just he understood that he has to let it sit for a bit as well. And I don't know, that just came naturally to me to just kind of close my eyes and take that moment in, because it just felt so soothing, the sound design of it, right? Just that moment of silence. And it's quite a prolonged moment of silence. I wasn't expecting to have my eyes closed or shut for that long. But then, of course, I opened them because Kiyoma makes an appearance at that point, right? Again, classic approach, jumps into action with his brand, his really specific brand of playful banter to alleviate the tension, right? But to maintain that grasp on the issue at hand and address it in a respectful manner as well, right? He's really good. He's really quite impressive in that sense. And he tells her that, they'll reconcile. They'll reconcile things, and, they'll need funds, and, he gets a location of her father. I'm not sure how far that is from their current location in Tokyo. But yeah, you could just see that Okarin wants to be the support system for her. And, sometimes you need someone there, right? Even if they're just hanging out in the background, hanging back, right? Just that presence, the knowledge of that presence can be quite a supportive and incredibly uplifting feeling as well, right? It can give you that strength to go ahead. It can give you that push to go ahead. Almost kind of feels like a safety net just to have that person there. But yeah, ultimately Okarin's approach is really impressive. It is, it's a beautiful approach as well. It's sensitive and mindful to Makise's predicament. And again, like I said, it's classic Okabe Rintaro as well, right? He tactfully injected a tonal shift to ease that tension, right? Yet reiterates his commitment, his desire to help a friend. And also kind of looking at it from her father's perspective. Yes, I can see how it could have that kind of effect on him. Not everyone's made the same. This man clearly was brilliant in his field once upon a time, from the sounds of things. But from the sounds of things, this is not an emotionally strong man. Like I said, he flunked it as a father. And it appears that he was insecure to the extent that he actually ended up becoming abusive. Though, of course, he always could have had that in him. And this possibly kind of brought it out and pushed him over the edge. But yeah, this anime certainly has its share of father-daughter relationships. I brought them up in the last couple of episodes as well. Even Nai and, Mr. Braun, Ferris and her father, Suzaha and her potential father. There's quite a bit of that. And again, Ruka and her father as well. Back then, you see how Makise noticed the relationship that Ruka had with his father at the time. A girl's relationship with her father can sometimes determine her ability to trust, right? Her need for approval and perhaps, her self-belief. In many cases, the daughter who does have a fulfilling relationship with her father is usually more trusting and perhaps more satisfied, right? In comparison to an emotionally absent father. Because again, a father's influence in his daughter's life can shape her self-esteem, her self-image, confidence, and opinions of men. Now, again, this is not really meant to be a one-size-fits-all. Some people are just better off, without a father. But again, some of the things I'm saying here are just these commonly accepted and observed things. And yeah, like I said, it appears that she still longs for that relationship, right? To kind of keep that memory alive of the good times that she did have with her father. So, again, there's always this idea, this possibility of her taking a chance to reconcile. I think I speculated some time ago now that, perhaps her father is at CERN, and that kind of takes her there again for a chance to reconcile, perhaps. But yeah, I think I'll wrap it up on that note. The time leap, exciting new addition, right? Exciting new possible time travel mechanic. Again, Makise believes it's not really time travel, it's more of a time jump or time leap. And I suppose that's how the name comes to be, right? And, again, there's always that idea, that notion of the moral and ethical dilemma of something like a time leap, right? Because you are essentially handing knowledge of the future, right, to someone in the past, to that person's past self. So again, moral and ethical dilemmas are always kind of a part of all of this. Yeah, they just kind of go hand in hand. Right then, if you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. Like I said, I really appreciate anyone who shows up in the comments, takes the time to, drop a comment and, give your thoughts, share your thoughts. Always nice. Also, if you are interested in early access or timer-based full length or full opacity, consider checking out the Patreon page. And again, potentially supporting the channel in the process of it all. The links are in the description and the pinned comment. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for the midpoint of the series, episode 12. Until then, take it easy.